Well, today, like I said, we're kicking off a brand new series called Yacht Club, and it's kind of funny. We were dreaming about this series several years ago. We were preparing to plant a church, and we were at this almost like a conference of talking about how to do it and all this kind of stuff. And this guy gets up who had started a church probably 30 years before in California. And he started out and he told a story to the whole group, and it was one of the most fascinating stories. Now, as we researched it, what I found out is it's so interesting. This happened to a small handful of things that we're going to talk about. So it wasn't widespread, but it happened to a small handful of them. And it was one of the most fascinating stories because of its parallel, I think, to the local church. Now, let me say this out the gate, though. If you're here and not a follower of Jesus, what you're going to get for the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you out the gate, what you're going to get for the next few minutes is really like a group of a couple of hundred people that are sitting around the dinner table, and that's what today's going to feel like. It's going to feel like you walked into like a family meeting and are hanging out, which is totally fine. But you're going to get the clearest picture of the heartbeat of our church and why we're here and why we're doing all this. So over the next few minutes, you're going to get that. And if you're here and you call Nuvo home, let me say this. What we're going to talk about for the next few minutes is something that I would say is not just a reminder, it's actually the core of who we are and why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. Now, the story that he told was so fascinating. Late 1700s, early 1800s, up in Massachusetts area, Maine, this sort of area, there were a group of people who were volunteers. And what would happen is as storms would come in, oftentimes there would be boats that would be out to sea and something would happen. It would be chaotic, boats going down or sinking, these sorts of things. And up in the New England coastline, what would happen is they would have what they would call life-saving stations, which is a group of volunteers that would come out. And almost as a small community of people, they would go, hey, if something's happening, we're going to rally around whatever's going on out there. And they would just sort of flock to this. They would go out in their own boats and they would rescue people. And so over time, they were called life-saving stations first. One specific one that happened that was fascinating is around 1876. A group of people went deep out into the waters and rescued a whole sort of ship of people who were going down. And if you can imagine this, best you can, it's a group of people who were just average, ordinary people going out to help rescue and save people. And over time, what they would end up being called, which is so fascinating, would be rescue societies. And these rescue societies would go, and they were very focused with a clear mission, clear urgency, and they were all on mission, moving in the same direction together. Now, the other part that's so fascinating about this, and I think it's so interesting about the story and the historical part of this is so interesting, is they were united around something that was bigger than them and they could never pull off individually on their own. They came together for a specific purpose to go do something. Now, you could fast forward and you kind of probably already know where this is going, which is really interesting. But over time, these rescue societies, right, through a couple of different ways, number one, we started getting the Coast Guard, and these eventually morphed into some of those things. But over time, a lot of these sort of shack-looking, kind of thrown together places would get bought up over time through the communities and through people that were around. These rescue societies that were very focused on going out and doing something for a specific purpose, over time, they just begin to morph. And what they begin to morph into, which again is so fascinating, is what we would sort of describe now as yacht clubs, which is just interesting. I don't think there's anything wrong with yacht clubs, but what's so fascinating about this is that over time, a group that was very specifically focused on one thing became something totally different, right? And over time, this group of people who had urgency, were on mission, a group of volunteers coming together to do something extraordinary, as that began to move over and over and over with time, what you found is that the urgency sort of began to evaporate. The mission began to evaporate. And over time, what really just happened is they became a place of comfort and rest for people. It became easy to be a part of those kinds of things. Now, when he told the story, I'm sitting there with a group of church planners who are all a little bit dumb enough to plant a church, you know what I'm talking about, and all ready to go and uncertain and fascinated by the whole thing. And over time, what became so interesting to me is everybody in that room is so funny. Everybody, there's 40 of us. We're yeah, church should never be that. We're going to be urgent. We're going to have urgency. We're going to go out. We're going to stay on mission. And most of the people that were in that room at some point or another, because this, how church planners are wired, are probably planting in response to something that they felt they could do different, right? So everybody in that room sort of talked about what that was looking like and how we're all going to go out. And everybody was equally passionate about the same thing in the beginning. Everybody's equally, strategic about how they'd go about it. And over time, you know this, what would happen is the trajectory of most every church that gets started is the exact same trajectory of what these rescue societies eventually became, the yacht clubs. Now, I would say this, and I mean this really wholeheartedly and kind of bluntly, I mean this, that trajectory towards comfort is the trajectory of almost every organization that you will see and be a part of. It's the trajectory of most companies that you're a part of. If you work in like the education system, you know this, you've probably seen this too. At some point, there were a group of people who were so passionate about kids and education, here we go. And then over time, through just whatever it was, it almost felt like the passion of the leadership began to wane, and it became about how we get it done, and all of a sudden it feels overwhelming, and they got so big, and then somewhere along the way, urgency left. For some of you, you've seen nonprofits like this. At the very beginning of whatever got started, they were so focused on the good, so focused on the mission, so focused on what the urgent thing that had to get solved was, that over time, they were like, we're gonna go. And then over time, what eroded was the sense of urgency to look outward beyond what currently was. I put it in my notes, I said it this way. When comfort becomes the highest value, specifically of going to church, right? It'll often lead to a very specific set of things, right? It'll lead to inward focus. It'll lead to some sort of self-centeredness. This is always a fun one. Some of you have grown up in church, so you know this. It'll lead to some version of intolerance to change and some version of exclusivity. In fact, that describes what those of you who grew up in church with, that describes what some of the churches you grew up with were like. Like, you wouldn't say this out loud, but like, you would have never invited somebody to the church that you grew up in. I've told this story before, but I was very passionate as like a middle schooler, and so I don't know if you can picture this. We used to wear like 3-piece suits to church when I grew up. I don't know if you, and it was a church plant, and we started this. So I had like the vest, the jacket, the pants, the tie. It was a clip-on, but don't judge me. Anyways, all those things, you know. And I was like, I'm gonna go invite, people from my school to church. And I invited a family one day, I'll never forget this. Everything about their experience was almost like the Inception thing that we talked about several months ago, where it just felt like everything turned in some form of judgment or some form of like, you don't belong here. There was even a part, my favorite part, I've never told this part before. They went to go sit down. Now this was a church plant, so they had to like set up and tear down chairs, right? They would go and do that, and there was a group of people who sat in the same row, and my friends went and sat in that row, and these people came and said, hey, I need you to get out of our seat. Now that's the most stereotypical whatever church story, and also it's exactly what happened, right? They walked up and asked them to move, right? And I go like, you're not like that. I know you're not like, but I just thought, that is the epitome of this. That what's been created was created primarily for me. What's been created is created primarily for my well-being. What's being created is primarily created for my preference, which is hard. And then somewhere along the way, all of these things are the trajectory for almost every organization, every nonprofit, but especially churches. And here's what's so interesting about church. And I'll just say this, and again, I know I'm kind of poking, but I've been in church a long time, and I love it. But you go to a church, and you know this, and you know it right off the gate when you go, if it's focused inward. We have all these metrics at our church. You don't even know this, but we have all these metrics at our church, and we will invite people to be secret shoppers to our church. The metric I care the most about outside of baptisms is the way people describe their first experience here. And the reason is this, because that experience tells more about who we are than just about anything else. Like, are they gonna like the music? They're gonna like the music. Are they gonna like the message? We won't talk about that part. Are they gonna like kids? For sure. But are they gonna feel welcomed with a group of people who are focused on them? And the minute that shifts, what that actually communicates is that we've begun to drift into this inward sort of focus. Now, I'll say this, and if you call Nouveau home, I'm absolutely talking to you, and that's this. Jesus calls the local church beyond our comfort every single time. Now, let me say this. This is always fun, and then I'm going to poke the whole time, but I'll poke here, right? Which means this. When you get like rubbed the wrong way on a preference, or when something isn't exactly the way you want, I'm just gonna say this. If it's not within the vein of the person that you care about inviting, and it's only in the vein of you, that is a consumeristic mindset, and is not why we started this thing, right? Can I say, and I'll just say it really bluntly, there's so many great churches in our city. And even more than this, I don't know how to say this well, because we visited so many of them before we came. And there's a lot of churches that are focused primarily on people who are Christians. And can I just say this? And I mean it lovingly. Those are great churches to go to and just not be on mission that Jesus called us into, because he called you beyond comfort. I've said that he called you beyond comfort, and he called you specifically to a mission. And it wasn't just like a handful of you, and it's certainly not just Nouveau Church, and it's certainly just not us and our family or staff or volunteers, it's not that. Jesus calls all people that are followers of Jesus, that are building this thing that is the Big C church all over the globe. He calls you beyond your comfort, and he calls you into a space where you go, it is not just about me. I am going into the world with purpose. And so this area of the Bible, it's called Mark. Mark is one of my favorite areas of the Bible. It's written, a lot of scholars would say it's written by the guy who is Mark, and he wrote with like these firsthand accounts of a lot of what was going on. And he writes with just enough detail to give you context for what was going on. But on the other side of this, it's actually like a fairly succinct way to read it. So when you read like the New Testament, you got Matthew, who's a little more verbose, John, who's all in his feels the whole time that he writes, Luke, who's a doctor, which is so fun to read because it feels like a doctor. And you got Acts, also written by him. But then you got Mark, who's just like, here's what happened, right? And one of the narratives that Mark talks about is actually a narrative where Jesus is at the height of his ministry. And he's not at the height of his ministry only because of what he taught. Jesus is at the height of his ministry because of the miracles that he was doing. And so when you do miraculous things, you notice people just show up to it. When you do miraculous things, people come to see what's going on. And so what we're gonna pick up today is in Mark, and what Jesus is doing is he's teaching to a group of people. And as he's teaching to a group of people, it feels like one of the most outlandish stories. And it feels outlandish, I think, because of where most of us, including me, where our hearts are at with people. And so Jesus is teaching, and if you can imagine this, it's just a house, and it's just packed full of people hearing Jesus teach, but don't miss this, also very curious about what Jesus is about to do. And here's Mark's account. Here's what he says. Mark chapter 2, it says, a few days later, right, Jesus again entered Capernaum, and the people heard that he had come home. So he'd come, they all heard that he was in town. So they gathered in such large numbers. I love this. There was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Now, I want you to picture this best you can, right? Showing up to a house, it's likely not very big. Have you ever been in a place where it was super crowded? Do you know what I'm talking about? And the person next to you is wearing Axe. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like you were close enough to smell the people around you, right? You were close enough to feel the sweat. You were close enough that these people were just packed in there, and Jesus is teaching. And not only that, but outside the door, everybody just wanted to get close enough to see what was going on. And so outside, it's packed out the door. People are standing around, and he's teaching to this group of people who are packed in there listening, but also kind of curious to see what would happen next. And it says this, Mark gives this account. It says, so some men came, bringing him a paralyzed man. Now, I want you to picture this, carried by four of them, right? And so they carry this guy, there's four of these guys carrying a paralyzed man, trying to get him to Jesus, because they believe that Jesus had the capacity to heal him, right? So they bring in this paralyzed man. But since they cannot get to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it and then lowered the mat the man was lying on. Now that is a very descriptive sentence that I feel like they could have taken 9 sentences to explain. Now I want you to picture this. They get up to this house where it's super packed, people are overflowing, Jesus is teaching, everybody's like, what's going on here? And they're like, we can't get in that way. And so one of them, and everybody has this friend, right, who goes, I have an idea. And you're like, you shouldn't, I got an idea. How do we get up there? And they figure out how to get up there. Now, again, this is the funny part of me. Jesus is teaching all these people. Can you imagine you're in a house, though, and somebody's like sawing a hole in the roof? Like somebody's got to say something like, this feels like, especially when you're packed in there, you know what I mean? Like somebody's like, eject, you know what I mean? Like, get me out of here. The miracle I need you to do, Jesus, is get me out, right? And they're sawing it. Now, I want you to picture this too. Have you ever sawed through anything? Now some of you are like men. You do it fast. When I saw something, I do that for a little while, take my inhaler, do it a little bit more, you know what I mean? I'm like, help us God. I'm like, I'm trying to get through it. It's not a quick thing. It wasn't like a button and a latch open. This happened probably for several minutes. Now again, picture this. And you're in there, and all of a sudden the mat with a paralyzed dude starts being lowered down with 4 guys like, oh crap, you know what I mean? Like, don't drop him, because that would have been real bad. They're trying to lower him down in a room that's packed, which means somebody had to come around and do this. Can y'all spread out and make some room? Now imagine you're already packed in like sardines. You're like, oh my, like trying to do this. Guys coming out of the ceiling. Now here's what's so fast. They told me this story when I was a kid. Like this is the fun one to tell when you're a kid, you know. Nobody ever like talked about this. They never talked about the 4 guys that did it cared enough about the friend to do all of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like I have friends, but like, I don't like heights. Do you know what I mean? Like you got to believe one of those guys wasn't like keen on heights, you know? Like I have people that I love, but I'm like, a roof, you know? They cared enough about him to carry him here. They believed that Jesus had the capacity to do something extraordinary so much that they were like, we got to get him to Jesus. And then they got to the house and there were so many people that they cared enough to then go, how do we get up there and just get him to Jesus? Now, the other part that's so interesting, again, nobody talks about this, is they could have just gone, you know what? Let's just set him down here and we'll wait. You know, like, he's got to come out sometime. You know what I'm talking about? How many of y'all know who Chip and Joanna Gaines is? Y'all know Chip and Joanna Gaines? Yeah. I love that you're here for this. Hey, baby. We are big Chip and Joanna Gaines fans, and we got to go see them one time in Cleveland, right? You ever do this? And it was supposed to be a meet and greet. You know what I'm talking about? And they get there, and the first thing that Chip says when he comes out, you know, because he's Chip and he's all funny, he's like, look, there are so many more of you than we thought there were going to be. And we're like 4 rows back of all these people kind of crowded. And he goes, so we're not going to be able to do the meet and greet tonight. And I turned to Emily, this is the fullness of my Enneagram 8, and I said, heck no, because I saw where they came in. And so I was like, hey, so all these people are packed in and, you know, we're all, you know, and they're talking and doing their thing. And we're just kind of like migrating over this way, like towards where they came in. And they had pipe and drape, kind of like that stuff in the back, but you could see through it. And I was like, here's what we're going to do. I was like, we drove all this way, an hour. We drove all this way and we're going to meet them, you know. And so they finish up their thing and they start walking this pipe and drape. Now, I'm brave enough to make a scene. I'm not brave enough to pass the pipe and drape. Do you know what I'm saying? But I get up nose to this, right? And I'm like, looking, I'm like, and this is what this is for real what I'm doing. Chip. You know, I'm like, Chip. And her sister, we found out later, saw me being an absolute idiot. Chip. And then comes to the pipe and drape nose to nose with me. Stop. How's that? So I back up. I'm like, all right. And then I watched her leave. Walk back up. Jojo. You know, like, the next guy that came was less kind and helped me realize that we weren't going to be Chip and Joanna Gaines that night. But I thought about this. I was like, you know what? I love, at the time, we were married. I was like, yeah, I love my wife enough to know I'm going to risk it for the biscuit. You know what I mean? I'm going to go. That was a weird phrase out there, but I'm going to do whatever it takes to get back. And I love this. I love her enough to do that. I don't love any of y'all enough to do that. Like, I'm going to do it. And I thought to myself, like, what would it take for 4 people to go, we both love this person enough and both have enough faith that Jesus can do something for him. And so again, you imagine this, eventually they get him all the way down, and what Mark says next is so fascinating. He says this, he says, so when Jesus saw their faith, and I'm gonna say, he said to the paralyzed man, he said, son, your sins are forgiven. Now, I want you to, you know, as best you can, again, in the culture that they're talking about, they were still trying to come into an understanding of what the Messiah was. So if you're a follower of Jesus on this side of Christianity, you go, yeah, Jesus forgives sins. But here, this is like almost like blasphemy. And beyond that, can we just be really honest? Like, let's just be really honest with the text. They didn't bring him here for Jesus to go, and your sins are forgiven. They brought him here for Jesus to go, get up and walk. So they lower him down, and you can imagine, I guess they're still on top, just looking down going, what? That's not it, you know? And then the religious leaders who would also come and hear Jesus teach and all this sort of thing, they would get so amped over a lot of the things that Jesus taught about. But this was like the thing. Like this was the thing as Jesus would talk and teach, especially later on, that they would go, wait, you can't say that because you are not that, right? And so it goes on, and Mark says this. He says, now some of the teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, why does this fellow, which that's a great translation, why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming, which again, worst thing you could do in this culture. And they said this, I love this, who can forgive sins but God alone? And the answer to that is, well, no one, right? They're all standing around looking, which makes sense, going, he's saying, I forgive your sins. Only God does that. Wait, you're saying that you are God. Now, I love this part too. In the text, Mark is very clear about this. It's like, they weren't just saying this out loud. They're just sitting there feeling it and thinking it, right? But you know what that's like too. Like you're around somebody and you know exactly what they're thinking and they're not saying anything. You know what I mean? Like you sit at Thanksgiving and you made that one comment and the entire table got quiet and it was just like, zoom, and you're like, so sorry I told you who I voted for. You know what I mean? Like you immediately felt that, you know? Or there's a moment where you said something. You know, women are like this especially. I love to hear these stories. We have a daughter, and even now, I'm like, it's so young how this happens. Like girls will just look at each other, and the way they look at each other says everything. And then the girl that they're looking at knows everything that is being said with the eyes. And as a dad, I'm like, I will come in. Like I am like feeling like, you see that? And you can see it all just right there. Guys just grunt, but girls can look and say, you know, like they know what's going on. And this is the most fascinating thing. It's like, they didn't even say it out loud. And Jesus, notice this, knows who and where they are. And immediately, here's what the text says, immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that who was, and then they said this, thinking in their hearts, and he said to them, why are you thinking these things? Which is kind of fun. It's kind of like that, you remember that movie, What Women Want? I think it's Mel Gibson, do you remember that? Where he can like read women's minds, and it's kind of like that. He's like, look, I know you're thinking it. Like, why are you thinking that? And then he goes off, and he does this throughout the New Testament. He just slices up over and over and over the thought patterns. He says this, he goes on, nope. He says, that's right. I'm gonna read it from here. Can I read it from here? Is that all right until it comes back? Yeah. I probably tripped something. That's probably on me. Oh, great. Nope. All right. He says this. He says, which is easier, to say this to a paralyzed man? He says, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat, and walk. He says, but I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. Which is this pronouncement in this moment. This pronouncement, we can go to the next one, yeah. This pronouncement of saying this. He's going like, I am the Son of God. I am the Savior. Which one's easier? Which one is easier in this moment? To do that. And then he goes on, he says this. He says, so he said to the man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. And he got up, and he took his mat, and he walked out in full view of them all. Now again, picture this. This is one of the most fascinating parts of Scripture. I love this. Because you get a little bit through the story and you forget. All the people sardines kind of back up. They create enough space for him to do his thing. They're overflowing with all these people. Jesus is kind of arguing with these, Pharisees. And then he goes, and the guy just gets the mat that they lowered him in. He starts walking out, right? Jock jams turns on as he goes. His friends are up there going, what about them apples? And he goes. And two things happen that's fascinating. Jesus does what Jesus does, and he redeems this person. And then he heals this person, and this person goes out. An extraordinary thing happened. And the other side of this, it's also, I think, so fascinating, is that everybody in that room was changed by seeing what Jesus did. I put in my notes to say it this way, that no follower of Jesus is exempt from being like one of those four people and bringing people to the person of Jesus. Most of the time the story is all about the paralyzed person being healed. I think the story is much more about the four people who brought the guy to Jesus. That they believed enough in the power of Jesus to redeem. But this is the part that I'd poke at. For most people who are followers of Jesus, this is what I'd poke at. But they cared enough about the person to bring him there. And Emily and I will get in the car and go on vacation or something. and y'all pray for her because we'll be like on a 9-hour trip. And I'm like, you ready to talk theology? You can't go anywhere, like you were trapped. Paw Patrol's playing in the background. A few years ago, we were talking, and I haven't been able to like get this idea out of my head. And it bothers me, deeply. It bothers me about me. But I think followers of Jesus believe that this is not all that there is. And not only that this is not all that there is, but that what happens after this, a person can have chosen to be with Jesus forever or be without Jesus forever. Now, I grew up in contexts where like the preacher would shout it and bang on something and like turn or burn, get right now, hell's hot, whatever that kind of stuff is. And I remember as I got older, I was like, there are things that are worse than burning forever. Like that's the call. It's hot and hell or whatever. No. It's just so fascinating to me. What we know about what happens next is that when a person accepts Jesus as their Savior, they experience the fullness of Jesus forever. The other side of this, and this is what I would say, like, do you actually believe that a person can then also go, I don't, and I choose to be without Jesus or goodness forever? And can I tell you something that's so fascinating? Especially in Western culture, we have become comfortable enough to be culturally okay with the idea that there are people who will spend eternity without Jesus, and it's not my responsibility. It's not on me. I used to get so amped. I grew up, sometimes people were like, is it predestined? Did God pick everybody? Or is it not? Is it free will? And I was like an 8th grader, 9th grader at a church that talk about this. I just don't care that much. All I know is that Jesus, he put us on a mission to say the people that are around me matter enough for me to tell them about Jesus. And here's the thing that drives me a little bit insane. How many of y'all watch Severance? Anybody watch Severance in the room? Severance fans? I'll be honest about it. You're in church. It is great. Yeah. All right. You watch the TV show that you loved, anything like that? We watched Severance, and for a week and a half, all I talked about to everybody that I knew or kind of knew was Severance. You know why? Because I loved it. And it was so fascinating. I was like, I love this TV. It's so entertaining. For an hour or 6 every night before I'd go to bed, I would watch Severance. And you know what I'd talk about? I'd talk about the thing that I loved that I thought was interesting. And I'd go an entire week, I could go a long time without telling somebody about something that I loved more and that mattered to me more. And I'd say, this is the thing. When we do that, we are revealing our heart to go, I either don't believe the thing or I don't care enough to talk about the thing. And that's like where you go, well, everything else in Christianity is about you becoming a better person. That's crap. That's not it at all. You're already a good person. You're pretty good at that. It's not that. Or you go, hey, you look around and you go, hey, Christianity is about me, character development for my kids. It will be. I think that's great for them, and they will be better. And at the same time, that's not the gospel. And the mission of your life isn't to live 70, 80, 90, whatever years that you get, and then you go, oh, I lived a good life. No, the mission of your life is Jesus. It's communing with him and sharing your faith and doing something in the world that is beyond you, what he put you here to do. And if the people around you matter to you like they matter to God, you wouldn't only talk about Severance, Patrick Holden. You would look out with the eyes like these 4 guys had and go, I love you and I care enough about you to bring you here. I grew up in a church where we would memorize verses. They gave me a King James Version Bible. Y'all ever read out of King James? It's kind of fun. It's great to give a 6-year-old a King James Bible. And it was a verse that I had to memorize as a kid. And as I got older, I got it in NIV, memorized it in that. And the verse is this. I love it. It says, and you know it. Most of you could quote it. For God so loved the world that what? He gave his only. We could sing this almost, right? Whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And I remember reading this as a kid. I'm like, that is so good. That is so true. Yes, he did. And I prayed a prayer and all this. Yes, absolutely. But for God so loved the world, you know what he did though? When Jesus set the mission of the church in motion, he didn't take his hands off of it and just go, oh, well, then I'm just going to just boom, 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 make everybody be a follower of me. No. He looked at the handful of people that were around. And essentially what he said was this: you're going to go build the church in the world. And at the guts of all of this, it's like this: for God so loved the world that he actually sent you. He sent you into the workplace. He sent you into your job. He sent you into your school. He sent you to the baseball field, even to that coach who's kind of a jerk. Like, he sent you all to those places. That's just me. He sent you all to those places. He sent you to wherever you go. He sent you to the restaurant that you love so much. You talk to that person every single time, and you know their name, and you know their story, and they know nothing about you because you haven't asked or shared. He sent you everywhere that you're gonna go. He sent you into the car dealership. He sent you to the DMV. Okay, no, not there, but everywhere else. He sent you everywhere that you're gonna go. He sent you everywhere that you're gonna go, not just for you, but on a mission to do something. And come on, almost every church at some point decides, are we gonna be a group of people who look outward, or are we gonna be a group of people who go, this is just for me. This is a thing I do on Sundays. This is a thing I do with group. I liked the message. I didn't like the message. I liked the music. I didn't. I have preferences. Or you go into your work and go, you know what? I am here for a reason. God gave you your kids for a reason. All of it, come on. There is something spiritual about every moment that you are a part of. And this is where, again, it feels churchy to say this, but this is like your personal ministry to the world, right? If we go to the next, your personal ministry to the world is to do what Jesus sent you here to do. And anything less, I don't know, like, he's going for it, but anything less than that is both a failure of faith on your part or a failure of urgency, and you have embraced apathy to some degree. You've looked at it and you go, I just don't want to talk about it because that's weird. Who cares? If it matters, it matters. Or like, I don't know I don't say things well. So? How many people do you know that say things well? Can we just be really honest about it? Like, come on, no. Or I'm not theological enough. Great, go, I don't know, but here's what I'm processing. Come on. It's not that thing. If it matters so much, then you begin to embrace a life that lives beyond you. So we started our church. I told you this before. I'd write down these things. And one of the things that I would write down was variations of this phrase. And I said, Nouveau Church is a launch pad for your personal ministry. I've said it so many times. In my early 20s, I got to work at some of the largest churches, some of the most prestigious. I loved it. It was great. A lot of them were on mission like this. It's fantastic. It's not about being big. We don't come here. I'll tell you, part of the reason we come in this room, I'll tell you this, we could go do this out there. Now, I don't want to set up chairs, but I'd say we could go do this out there. Because every Sunday you come in here, I want you to do that. I want you to look around this auditorium, right? All of the empty seats over here. All the empty seats over here. We put pipe and drape back there. All the empty seats back there. I want you to get a visual of what 0.0001% of our city looks like, right? Like, even if we visit this one time, it is such a small, minute thing. And it's not to be a big thing. It's to reach people through what God wants to do through you. It is a launch pad for you to experience the power and the fullness of what it means to be a follower of Jesus in the world, because it matters that you do. And if you don't, and you're like, I don't care about that at all. Can I just tell you, that's so great. I said this at our vision night, which is everybody but cleanses when I say it. I'm like, there are so many other churches that you'll be so much happier at. Because we don't cater to an only question that goes, oh, well, what about just us? We go, what about them? Where are they? And it's not even like it's a better way to do church. It is, but it's not even that. And I mean this is why it matters. It's because there are already so many great churches doing that thing. Why it matters is because there are people all around you who don't know Jesus yet. So I put on my notes, and this is like a commitment for me that I have to process consistently. It says that I will invite people to the church that I love. Now, I love this. Some people will go like, you know what? This is fun for me. Like, we the pastor should be easy. It is not easy when you're the pastor to invite people. Everybody stops swearing and drinking around you as soon as they know you're a pastor. You know what I mean? Not you guys, but everybody else. You know, I'm like, it made it seem like y'all were all sloshed. I didn't mean it like that. I was just like, I mean, some of you, but all right. But can I just tell you, come on, I mean this, come on. If I love it, I'll tell you about it. Like, you never have to prompt me for me to tell you how great my almost 9-year-old son is at baseball. I don't really care what you think. I love it. I'm going to tell you about it. None of you want to hear me talk about the Atlanta Braves, and I won't because they're 1-7. Anyway, but like, if you know, you know. But like, I'm not worried what you think about me and Matt Olson. Sorry, that was for you. Thank you. He's a stud. That's all I'm saying. He's great. I don't care what you think about that. I love it. I'm going to tell you about it. A handful of people, I love it. A handful of people told me that they like Severance, right? You know how I got into Severance? And I've had Apple. I don't watch anything on Apple TV. I pay for it for no reason at all until one show comes out every 6 years, right? Like, Severance is good. I was like, I don't know. It's kind of weird. Severance is really good. I watched 3 episodes of Severance. I didn't like it at all. I was bored out of my mind. But you know what? It's funny. But people were like, no, you got to keep going. You got to keep watching. They keep telling me about it. Keep telling me. I was like, all right, we'll keep going. So we kept going. And then I fell in love with it. Then I watched it, and I went and told everybody about it, right? Like, it is that easy in every other area. You're just afraid because it's faith. You're just afraid because somebody on Twitter makes it seem weird that you can't talk about your faith. You're a little bit scared about what HR is going to think if you talk about it, or people know that you're Christian. But come on, most of those fears aren't true anyway. When was the last time you told somebody, I love this thing, and they go, well, I don't like that? Nobody does that. You know how rare it is? You know how far right or left-leaning you have to be to look at somebody who looks at you and go, you know what's made a difference in my life? Amen. Jesus. Nobody's looking at you going, well, I don't know, but like, they don't do that. You don't lose friends by telling you this matters to me. And if you do, that's your friend. That's just, there is a culture of understanding that if you are a follower of Jesus, you can't talk about it. We talk about everything else but this. And that's just false. That fear is not true. And so I just say, like, I invite people to the church that I love. And the second one is this. This is a question that I wrestle through a lot, and that's this. How do I do this and not be weird? And you know what's fascinating me? The fact that that's the first question that comes to my mind is hard. Because it's not weird when I talk about any other thing. Now, if you go and you pull out a Bible and you smack somebody with it, yeah, no, maybe not. Or you're like, hell's hot. Like, that's weird. Maybe don't do it that way. Like, for sure, there are weird people, but there are weird people who do weird things anyway. That's not it. You look at people and you are a human being to those people. And if it matters to you and you love it, it shapes your life, and it has the power to shape theirs too. So I have a close friend and mentor. His name is Billy Phoenix. I love him so much. When I grow up, I want to be like, and I heard him talk about this recently, and I said, I'm not going to say it better than that, so I swiped it from him. And here's what he said about it, and I love it. Here's what he said this. He says, you live a life that makes people curious. You live a life that makes people curious. And you know what you have to do this? You have to do things that make people curious. Like the way that you have peace in the world makes people curious. I was with a group of people the other day who had every reason to experience something that's so hard and painful. But you know what's funny? The way they handled it and experienced it, Jesus was so powerfully at the center of it. And I walked back in and I heard somebody else talking about their experience with it. And they had no idea. And they were talking about something that made the person curious. And one of the most difficult things, I go like, that's the thing that makes people curious, because you live your life different. The way you spend your money, when you say no to these things and you say yes to these things because it's beyond you, like that doesn't make any sense for most people. It doesn't make any sense because it's beyond you, and it matters because it matters to you. There's a guy named Peter who wrote this fascinating passage, and this is a snippet of it. I love what he says. He said this way. He says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason. What is this? For the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. That you are able to give a reason for the hope that you have, that you are intentionally talking about the thing that has changed your life, if it has in fact changed your life. if it is not just a cultural thing. He did that. Second one is this. He says this. He says, lean in and let God use you, right? This feels so like supernatural, and it can't be, but I'm gonna say like the specific part of this, if I'm gonna give you like a couple questions on this, and that's this. First question is this: how's it going? But ask genuinely. You know what I mean? Like that'll set you apart from most people. Look at somebody in the eyes and say, how are you doing and how's it actually going? And the second question is this: as you are able to go like, and how can I help? And actually be willing to help. And this is where, again, everybody's cool with those first two questions. Everybody's cool with it, right? The third one, though, is the one that'll bother us, right? Is you hear their story and you look at your story and you go, you know what's helped me in this? Jesus. This is where the disconnect is. And this is what I would say, like, I wish I could push you to go, either share your story or go like this, or just come sit with me. I'll tell you what helps me, a community of people who are around me, who are moving in the same proximity towards Jesus. That has helped me. My small group has helped me. Our church has helped me. Look at how this has helped our kids. This thing matters in those moments. Come to me, extend an invitation. It is actually that easy. And you go, well, what happens if they say no? Well, they said no, and you are just fine. You'll go finish your Raising Cane. I'm talking to me now. And you'll be fine, you know? But you're genuine and you lean in. And in those sacred moments, you go, God, I wish that you would use me. And I'll just tell you, when you do this for real, you will be shocked at the opportunities that you have with people. This is one I added, I should say, like I added this in case, I don't want to get tagged to Billy, but I want you to suspend your cynicism as best you can. How many of you, be honest, you're like me? You're a natural cynic to just about everything. Anybody a natural cynic? Except to severance, but like you are a natural cynic to just about everything. Can I tell you this? That, and I don't want to like over spiritualize it, that cynicism, the default towards it not being good or true or real, is a stronghold that happens on so many people's hearts, including mine, that caused me to stop moving forward in what God has called me to do. Part of being a follower of Jesus is that you actively resist that thing and believe the best. And you know what? If you're a follower of Jesus in the room, somebody that invited you, or your parents, or your small group leader, or your Sunday school teacher with the flannel graph stuff and all of those things, somebody along the way suspended their cynicism enough to go, this person matters enough to me. I put in my notes and said it this way. I said, when was the last time that someone got upset with you for sharing about something that you loved, enjoyed, and made a difference for you? The answer to that for most of us is, well, never. And so when it comes to this, lean in and go, this matters to me. I want you to like rep the brand of the place that you love and do that. Not because you wear cool clothes, not because it's a great shirt, even though they're great shirts, not because it's a cool car decal, not even those things. Because at some point along the way, you're gonna have a conversation with somebody about that thing. And what comes next is not just like, and our church is good. It's here's my story, and here's how that matters and how it connects to me. So I'll tell you how much we believe in it. I'll tell you, we did these things. Where's Ryan Grail at? Everybody wave at Ryan. Ryan's back there. A couple of days ago, I called Ryan. No, I didn't. I texted him. I don't call anybody. Anyway, I texted him. I was like, hey, I want you to do this for me. We're going to give everybody a t-shirt at Nuvo. And when they come that day, we're going to do it. Can you do it in 2.5 days? He goes, I don't know if I can, but he did, which is great. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you, everybody that comes today gets a t-shirt. Can I tell you what I want you to do with it? I want you to work out in your t-shirt. Some of you are like, I don't work out. Me either. So what I want you to do is, yeah, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a t-shirt. I want you to wear it to the places that you go. I want you to go wherever you're gonna go and do the thing. And some of you are like, I gotta wash it every 2 days. I'm like, no, you should wash it every day. But you're gonna go and you're gonna wear it. And here's why you're gonna wear it. Not because it's just cool. It is comfortable. Because it's a conversation starter. And then you're gonna be bold and talk about why this matters to you, right? I want you to take one. We bought enough, for, I think it was a big crowd today, for most everybody to get a t-shirt, right? I want you to do that. A while back, we did this at another place we were at, and we had this middle school student that took one, and I love this. He wore it every day for 3 weeks. And he prayed before he did it. Like, God, I pray that you'd help me to have a conversation. He's introverted like me, which I love. Help me to have a conversation about it. And he was doing that. And then he came back to our church with about a dozen students and their families. And you know what bothered me about it? Because I was like, it's not just innocent. He just doesn't carry the baggage that I carry about how God can use people who do stuff like that. The last thing I'm going to say, and we're going to wrap up, it's kind of the bottom line. This is the thing I want you to think about. Is never underestimate, right? Never underestimate. Never underestimate what God can do through a personal invitation. So this is where we're going to end and wrap up. I had a friend, a really great friend. I was talking to you right before service. I was like, man, I'd love to end with a great story, and I have all these stories. But he was like, hey, yeah, that's kind of my story. I was like, he was telling me about it. And he told me kind of the fullness of it, which is cool. And maybe someday we'll get him on video telling you this. But the part that got me, though, is he was like, I had this neighbor. And for a solid 2 years, the neighbor would talk to me about this thing. And they'd see me, and we'd have a conversation. And then they would talk to me about this. Now, here's what I want you to imagine. Now, this is where I'd go, like, the resiliency and the care is something that I admire so much because this is hard. Can you imagine 2 years every time you saw somebody getting rejected around the thing? For 2 years. And then after that 2-year mark, this person had a set of experiences that led them to ultimately, being a part of all this, giving their life to Christ, complete 180 turn. And I laughed. I was like, there was this woman that was his neighbor that consistently over 2 years had the courage, had the I don't care what you think. I had and this thing mattered to me, and it mattered to my life. And here's the difference that it made over and over and over again. And this person came to faith. Now, can I tell you something? And I know I've been talking a while. Some of you, that's like, yes. And come on, can we be really honest? Because I've sat in these services too. And some of you, you hear that and you go, if you're really honest, you go, I just don't care. You don't feel it. You just don't care that much. And I get that too. So I say, like, if it hits you and you go, I just don't care, the real question behind that is, what do you actually believe about God and Jesus and what comes next and what's possible for people in this life? And if you hear that and you go, man, that should be me, but I have all these reasons why I don't do it, I'd go, at some point or another, you just decide that this is going to be a part of what it means for you to follow Jesus. We're willing to die to ourselves in so many ways. We'll die to ourselves financially and give to things beyond ourselves. We'll die to ourselves with our time and give, time that we don't really feel like we have. We'll die to ourselves when it comes to personal growth and understanding what it means to follow Jesus. But it is hard for many of us to die to ourselves, to go, I'm going to set this aside. My pride, my fear of what might come in a conversation. We don't die to ourselves that way enough to tell somebody why this actually matters. This is where we're going to end. A year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, some of you are going to get this thing, and it's going to bug you, and it's going to keep you up at night. And what you don't know right now is that there is a single mom somewhere who is anxious, trying to figure out how they're going to make it all work. The life feels like it's discombobulated. And that person's story is going to intersect with your story, and it's going to intersect with the story of our church. And that person's going to come to faith, come to Jesus. They're going to be baptized, and you're going to look back and go, I'm so glad I did. All across, I love that we meet in high school. Every single week, I come in this high school, and I'll find a minute and a moment somewhere here to pray. Because I know, like you know, that the number of students that go here that are carrying anxiety and depression and fear and uncertainty about their future and life, wondering if it's worth it, all of those kinds of things, that they're going to come here. And at some point, somebody He's going to tell them about this. And that student's story is going to connect with that person's story, and it's going to point to Jesus. And here's what happened. Please don't miss this. And we think about it in terms of the one person, but it's not just about the one person. It's about their kids. And they're going to raise their kids in a way where it points to Jesus. Their kids are going to come to faith. And then their kids, it changes generation. It changes beyond just the one thing. It changes a person and then their people and their family moving forward. Somewhere there's an empty nester, and you know this. And some of you are the empty nester who prays and prays and prays that your kids, that they grew up in church, but they walked away from the whole thing. They deconstructed it all, and they have all the reasons to. And you pray. Some of you tell me this. You pray over and over and over again. But somewhere along the way, that person's story, your kid's story, is going to connect with somebody else's story who points them to Jesus. They're going to come to faith, and they're going to get baptized. They're going to share it with other people, and the whole trajectory of their life is going to change. And it's going to change because somebody said, this matters enough to engage with it. And I know this, and I don't know. Some of you in the room are like, let's go. Some of you in the room are like, I want to, but I'm not sure. And some of you aren't. I'd say that middle section in particular is the vast majority of us. And I'll just tell you, whatever it takes for you to be who God has called you to be in this area, I want you to do.